Good evening. Welcome to Rebirth Podcast. Tonight we're going to be talking about twisted thinking. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to tonight's video. Enjoy.
Out of the ashes we will soar to a destiny we can't ignore. Heartbeats echo through the night with every dream and endless flight. Together strong, let's break the mold. Our rebirth and stories told. It's time to renew, rebuild, restore. Unlock the dreams we've been waiting for. Rise up higher, more and more. With every breath, a new dawn's roar.
Good evening. Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome back to Rebirth Podcast. I'm your host, Shea Marriott. And tonight, man, I'm so excited. I have my girl sitting on the couch with me, licensed therapist in the state of Delaware and Maryland.
Yes.
Jen Fontal.
I'm so happy to be here.
I know. How you doing, baby?
I'm good.
It's
I'm
so good to see you.
Likewise.
Yes. Listen, y'all, we go back many years. So she's been on the podcast several times. She's also been on the Rebirth panel. You did the panel twice, right? You've been on the panel a couple times.
Yeah, I think
when we were up on
twice.
Philadelphia Pike.
Yes.
You were on what was that place? Revive, right? And then at Theater Inn.
Yes.
Yeah. So what has been your experience being on a panel, on a Rebirth Live panel?
It's been colorful. It's been interesting to meet different people and hear different perspectives of all age ranges. You know, it's a great way to kind of connect with people from all walks of life.
Yeah, it definitely is. And then when you get the audience,
Yes,
when they start asking their questions, it's just like, ooh, what they gonna say? What they gonna ask?
Spicy.
Yeah, it gets a little spicy. Absolutely.
Yes.
So if you haven't been to a Rebirth Live, please, you gotta come to 2025 Rebirth Live. We actually have a date, right? What is the date? October 25th? October 25th. So 10/25/25 is the new date for the Rebirth Live. So we are really excited. And I've been on this season of healing, you know, just healing, my own healing journey that I've been going through. But most of my guests, most of the things that we've been talking about have been talking about healing in some way, you know. So this year for the Rebirth Live, I think we're going to be focusing on healing our community, and just really getting people on the panel that are experts in this and that are out there doing the work, rather it's in the community, rather it's in the mental health field, pastoral, whatever it is. We are looking for people to be on the panel. So if you are interested, please send me an email at info@rebirthlive@gmail.com. We are going to be starting to take interviews and really start preparing, because this year, and I hope I'm not making this announcement too soon, and maybe I'm gonna hold off on that, but there is going to be a Rebirth Live, but there's something else that's going to be happening. So I'm going to wait before I announce the whole thing, but it's a possibility that's going to be bigger than what it has been. So we're very excited about that. Yes. Very excited.
We love surprises, and I'm excited to see where this blossoms to.
Absolutely. I appreciate you. So before we get into tonight's show, if you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe. Tonight, we're going to be talking about twisted thinking. And I just want to let you guys know, she picked this topic tonight. So I'm going to be new to this information to see where this is going. I'm going to let her take the wheel on this. So I'm going to be sitting here new with y'all also watching. So please, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. Before we get started, let's talk about some of the things that's going to be happening, coming up, that we have going on in the community. So first up, we have... Hold on. Producer a little slow tonight, but it's all good. I am built for this. Come on now. If you've seen a Rebirth podcast or a Rebirth Live, I know you've seen Pastor Delisa Lewis. Okay. So this is her event. I am built for this. This is going to be happening on April 26th at Christiana Hilton. Relentless 2.0. Joining her will be Pastor Tanya Hall and Pastor Dana Rue. So get ready to ignite your passion, renew your strength, and step boldly into your God-given purpose. Okay? Registration is $75 for early bird. This also includes lunch. So you can register at eventbrite.com. And this is going to be October 26th from 10 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. 10 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Yeah, that's correct. April. Did I say October? Oh, my bad. Oh my God. Okay, I'm already on the Rebirth Live. That will be in October. I mean, in April, guys. I'm so sorry. Lord have mercy. Sorry, Delisa. And then next up, again, another one of our Rebirth Live panel members. I mean, we just doing good. Listen, we're doing amazing things out here, y'all. We didn't come to play. Breaking the Code of Silence. Licensed therapist Eric Robinson and Corey Strand, youth minister, will be doing a men and boys group on April 26th. Also, get your phones out, take a picture of the QR code, and sign up. Reserve your spot. This is absolutely free, but you have to reserve by April 24th. You're going to get a breakfast at 9:15 a.m. and then the workshop starts at 10 a.m. This is going to be at Tabernacle Full Gospel Baptist Cathedral. That was a mouthful. Woo! On 501 Washington Street in Wilmington, Delaware. This is for ages 12 and up. He did this in February, but it was just for the men in February. But this time is going to be for the boys and the men. And I believe they're going to have separate groups. So make sure you check him out. And then last but not least, we got the African Food and Culture Festival. Yes, Tubman Garrett Riverfront Park on Rosa Parks Drive in Wilmington, Delaware. This is happening Saturday, May 24th, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Again, absolutely free. Okay? So you can't say there's nothing to do in Delaware. For more information, go to africaday23 at yahoo.com. Look, that food look good, girl.
It really does.
Have you ever had African cuisine?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay.
Have you?
So I've had jollof. I may be saying this wrong. Jollof rice. Jollof rice. Yes. Mm-hmm. And then a friend of mine's made this this recipe with okra, and I love okra. My grandmother used to make okra. So I'm not for sure if it was an African cuisine or not, but it was good. It was really, really good. So but yeah, I'm excited. We were invited to go. They did reach out and ask if Rebirth would be available to come. So you're welcome to join us.
Of course.
May 24th, we go out there and get our dance on.
Well, I like to eat and I love to dance, so it's a perfect combo.
Exactly, a balance.
Yes,
so we can eat and then we can work it off.
Okay.
We can eat and then we can work it off. Again, welcome to Rebirth Podcast. If you just joined us, we're just having fun tonight, y'all. It's a really laid back night. So I'm gonna give this over. Let my girl handle this. She wants to talk about twisted thinking. I don't know where this is going, but we're gonna ride with it. So let's go.
Well, again, first and foremost, thank you for having me onto the show. Absolutely. And for those that are tuning in, thank you for welcoming me onto the Rebirth. And so, it's interesting that you talked about, healing. You're in the season of, working through things physically, mentally, right? And oftentimes what comes with healing, at least for me, right, is the mental aspect of it. And what I mean by that, right, is that, looking into, different types of thinking. And so bear with me. I'll give you some more information about that. But the analogy that I often like to give clients, right, is let's say, for example, I have a pair of glasses, right? A pair of glasses that have prescription, and you were to put them on, you were to try to read a book. What would likely happen?
they're not going to adjust to my eyesight. It's going to probably be blurry.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What would likely happen if you tried to read, let's say, a text from a book with those prescriptions?
I probably won't be able to see it.
Mm-hmm. Likely, right? That
Mm-hmm.
image would be distorted, right?
Right.
It's hard to kind of read through something that isn't your prescription in the first place,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I use that analogy to describe what we commonly refer in the mental health field as cognitive distortions.
Mm-hmm.
And to put it in layman terms, it's pretty much distorted thinking, irrational thoughts that skew your perception of reality,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we often talk about it in mental health because it's something that I noticed that many of my clients seem to struggle with without even necessarily realizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting part about it is that, when you think certain ways or have a tendency of thinking in certain patterns,
Mm-hmm.
after a while, it just becomes normal.
Right.
It's hard to recognize or identify any fault, or not even fault, but it's hard to see any other way of thinking if that's been your norm for most of your
Mm-hmm.
life,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so oftentimes, people, these thoughts impact not only how, we view situations, but they impact how we feel, and they also impact how we behave, and even more deeper than that, how we see ourselves.
Right. Right.
And so some common thinking patterns that I often see that patients tend to struggle with is like black and white thinking,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or the tendency to kind of generalize statements to everybody. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
give you a specific example, especially for dating, right?
Okay.
You know, um, People may have experienced maybe someone who may have not treated them right,
Mm-hmm.
cheated on them, right?
Right. Right.
And they take that one experience and generalize it to everybody.
Yeah.
Think about even the rebirth and some of the
Mm-hmm.
things that were brought up there. But, for example, this guy cheated on me, so all men ain't shit.
Right.
Or this friend was disloyal to me and she wasn't forthcoming.
Mm-hmm.
All women are
Right. I
disloyal.
don't mess with women like that, right? Because that
Uh-huh.
came up, right? I don't do
Mhm.
women, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I'm always interested in hearing the other experience of therapists, like what types of kind of
Mm.
negative thought patterns come up for some of your patients.
I do a lot of work with Black women and Black men.
Mm.
So I say for the women, um, that imposter syndrome comes up for a lot of
Mm.
uh women of color.
Mhm.
Um, and also the distortion of that they have to be strong.
Mm.
Right. And I think that's something that we all kind of share. I remember us all having a conversation, saying it feels almost offensive, although we know that people are complimenting us on our strength,
Mm.
but sometimes it feels offensive when someone says, if you're talking to someone about something that's heavy on you, and then their comment is, well, you're strong, you'll get through it.
Mm.
And it's like, that already, but why do I have to be strong all the time? Why can't I just be? Why does the expectation of Black women that they have to be strong, they gotta muster through this, they have to pull through this, they have to carry all the load? That comes up a lot. And when you tell them, like, no, you don't, you don't have to do all of those things.
Mm.
It's just like, yeah, I do. Well, why? Because my mama did it, my grandmother did it. Like, we're supposed to be able to do those things.
Mm.
And that's the thinking, that if I don't do it, then I'm not strong,
Mm.
or I won't live up to that label that is placed on many of us, that we have to be strong. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what that being strong means, the definition means when someone says that.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if I choose not to carry your load, my mom's load, the kids' load, then that means I'm not strong.
Mm.
Right? So
Yeah.
that comes up a lot.
It's interesting because I know that can be triggering for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different,
Mm-hmm.
reasons. And, those are one of the many various labels that I often hear that come up, especially in working with Black women as well.
Mhm.
If I don't do it, who will?
Exactly.
You know, um, the other, common distortions that I hear often is, you know, magnifying and minimizing. And what I mean specifically by that is sometimes, people in general have a tendency of minimizing their own accomplishments, minimizing
Mhm.
their own efforts, right? And magnifying everybody else's,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And with those, I often kind of tend to see feelings, people often kind of describe feelings of inadequacy, like I'm not
Mhm.
doing enough, I'm not enough,
Right.
you know,
Right.
I haven't reached far enough,
Mhm.
there's a lot of different distorted thoughts that often come to mind when kind of people are processing different situations. And again, those are some of the ones that, come across in sessions, right? And
Mhm.
for those of you that may be listening, like, why does talking about distorted thinking matter? I mean,
Mhm.
think about the analogy that I gave about glasses, right? Putting them on, going through
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
viewing things, right, from an angle that you believe is normal because that's
Right.
how you've always perceived things, right?
Yes. That's
And
good.
literally your perception influences a lot.
Mhm.
you know it
Mhm.
influences the way that you communicate to others.
Mhm.
It influences how you see yourself.
Mhm.
It influences the kind of boundaries you do or you don't set.
Yep.
It's a bit of a domino effect, I like to say. Again, I speak in metaphors, and so again, these distorted thoughts have a bit of a domino effect. They affect your feelings, they
Mhm.
affect, your behavior, right? And you mentioned a really good question that oftentimes I like to ask patients, like, why?
Mhm.
Where is this coming from?
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know? And so what are often some of the responses you receive when you challenge, where does this idea of being strong coming
Yeah.
from?
So it's a learned behavior,
Mm,
right? And most of the time it's coming from either a place of where they had no choice but
mm,
to, right? Rather there
mhm.
was some type of abandonment early on.
Yeah.
And they had to, be the person to take control or to parent their younger siblings or
Mhm.
whatever the case may be. Um it it appears that it always came from some type of childhood trauma,
Mm,
some type of childhood trauma. But then you had women that were coming out of marriages, and it was a thing of, I got to now rebuild my life and I got to figure this out. So now my thoughts is this marriage didn't work. Now, like you said, nobody's going to want me.
mm,
I got kids. Nobody's going to want anybody that have kids, right?
mm,
Where did that come from? That came from the person that you're divorcing,
mm,
because those are the thoughts that they put in your head to try to keep you in the relationship,
mm.
right?
Yeah,
So it can come from childhood, but some of it comes from current relationships that we have been in that may not serve us anymore.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're people, right? And we don't stop growing, and we don't stop being molded by our
Mhm.
experiences when we're, young, right? Those experiences that, influence these kind of distorted or twisted thinking, right? Often comes from outside of, how we were raised, maybe,
Mhm.
what we were exposed to,
Mhm.
things we experienced in adulthood as well,
Yeah.
whether we had traumatic relationships, whether just the ending of a really toxic
Mhm.
relationship.
Mhm.
There's a slew of different things that, you know, impacts and influence the way that, we see the world. And
Mhm.
outside of that, right, it could be also health challenges, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I've had experience in working with people that maybe whose parents had a tendency to think the worst or
Mhm.
had a tendency to catastrophize, right?
Right.
Same thing,
Right.
thinking the worst, right? And naturally that became their learned behavior as
Mm.
well because it was
Mhm.
modeled to them.
Mhm.
And the beautiful thing, although it may not necessarily sound that way, right, is that, this is learned. And
Yeah.
anything that's learned can also be
Unlearned.
unlearned.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. I think social media too is a big one,
Oh,
especially
for sure.
for kids.
Mm,
And that's why it's so important, because what do people go to social media for, or I would say post, right?
mm,
Especially with IG, is the attention, especially with the kids, the younger generation. And if that attention goes left and the
mm,
comments become, not so good, they're more negative, then now you have that distortion that
mm-hmm.
you've picked up from social media, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a really big one in this time and day. Social media is huge.
Oh, for sure. It's
Mhm.
powerful in shaping
Mhm.
our young ones. I mean, think about, some of your most favorite influencers that you see on
Mhm.
YouTube, Facebook,
Mhm.
Instagram, and how much their influence impacts some of the younger viewers,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and how it kind of shapes their perception of, how they see others, how they see the
Mhm.
world. That tendency is,
Mhm.
as we like to refer to, or some people like to refer to, some of the younger generation, the popcorn generation. They,
Right.
they want things instantly,
Right.
right?
Right.
It again all plays a factor
Mhm.
into these distorted thoughts,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
You know,
What about religion? Because
mm,
I think that would be I don't so I say maybe about 2 years ago. I don't know what was going on, but it seemed like I was getting a lot of patients coming in with church hurt.
mm.
I was like, was y'all all at the same church convention? Like, what is happening?
Yeah.
It was a lot of people coming in for with church hurt, and I
Mm,
wanted to learn more about what that looked like, right?
yeah.
And what was their actual experience? Because for me, it's just like, okay, all right, this church is not for me. I'll move on. But some of the stories was like, whoa, like it was to the level of making someone stand up in front of the congregation,
Mm,
and asking the congregation for forgiveness
wow.
for something that they had did. And I believe this particular situation was she got pregnant out of wedlock or whatever.
Mm,
And and that was years ago that had happened to her, but she's never got over that. So
wow.
it's just like, what was the lesson? What was the takeaway walking away
Mm,
from a church
mm,
where they say, come as you are, where you're supposed to love each other, you're supposed to,
yeah.
and they embarrassed you. They made you stand up in front of the congregation and say what had happened, and then ask the congregation, people that you really don't know, that doesn't know anything about your life,
Mm,
for forgiveness. Right?
yeah.
So, and it was a lot. It was a lot to unpack. So I think that that twisted thinking can also come from church or
Absolutely.
religion. And I love church. I
Yeah.
grew up in church. I'm not saying every church, but I think that we have to be mindful that
Mm.
these type of hurts can come from that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because I don't think it's talked about, right? But not in relation to distorted thing, at least from, my experience.
Mhm.
There have been experiences, even experiences, shared in the news, right? Of people experience trauma in the church,
Mhm.
right? Being abused and hurt by
Mhm.
those in authority,
Exactly.
right? And you brought up a really good point in sharing about the religion piece, right? When we have such very traumatizing experiences or challenging experiences, whether
Mhm.
it's with religion or, parents or anything of that nature, right? We often have to kind of look at the narrative we create behind those experiences that are attached to that kind of distorted thoughts. And what I mean by that is that, from that experience, I wonder, like, did she have the narrative? All churches are bad, or,
Mhm.
you know, um, the head of the churches are not trustworthy. Church is not for me at all.
Mhm.
You know, um, Again, that's an example of kind of generalizing statements, having a really, negative experience with one aspect, whether it's relationship, churches, right, and generalizing it to
Right. Right.
everything.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, so like, what were some of the narratives that came of that?
She didn't trust. churches, period. Like, it was years before she can actually get back into a church. And she was one of those people that was very committed to the different ministries. So she served. She served.
Wow.
And, being so committed to that and serving, and then to have that happen, it was humiliating for her, so she just didn't, she was also I should say, she was fat shamed as well. So that was another piece that, she was working through as well.
Oh.
So it was a lot to unpack, and it was really my first time really experiencing. I'm like, oh wow, like that's crazy. Like it's way deeper than you just, well, you don't just get up and go to a different church or whatever.
Yeah.
No, this person was humiliated in front of the congregation. So and that's not cool.
No.
That's not cool. So yeah, so she didn't trust any type of churches. She wanted to attend or get the word of God, she would watch it on TV. But to actually go into church was traumatizing for her.
I mean, I can understand why, just based off of some of the things that you were sharing. And that brings me to my other point with these distorted thoughts, right? We know that they're unhelpful. And sometimes, I have patients that are able to recognize, like, I know this thought process is unhelpful, right? And it's not something I can turn off, and I'm not advocating for people to be positively or overly optimistic, right, and challenging these thoughts, right? But part of the work in being able to recognize this twisted thinking is being able to recognize this twisted thinking, right? And I'll get into how we can do that in a little bit. But, the other aspect of it that I want to highlight is that sometimes we, although we may not be in those, traumatizing or challenging experience that may have birthed some of these distorted thoughts, right? We may reinforce those thoughts as a way to protect ourselves from re-experiencing those same things, right? We may keep churches at a distance because of what happened.
Right.
We may, opt to remain single, for what happened in our last relationship, I mean, the list goes on.
Did for 6 years. And I enjoyed is the mic on? I enjoyed every bit of those moments.
As you should. As you should. As you should.
But that was my past. That was my past, But yeah, you do. And her distorted thinking to that was not just about all churches was like that, but how she felt God see her. Because for her, God was the church. So if the church didn't accept me, or the church made me stand in front of all of these people, then God does not care or love me. You know what I'm saying? So that was the distorted thinking that she had. She wasn't good enough for God. Right? So, yeah.
I mean, that's really hard to hear, and I think that's a perfect example again of how powerful, our experiences influence, our thoughts, and in turn affect our self-esteem, our view of ourselves, and, I think part of the work, again, recognizing, identifying these thoughts, right? And I don't know, maybe some people may be asking, like, how do I know if I have twisted thinking or unhelpful thoughts?
That's a good question. So how do they know? How do they know?
I mean, I want you to, ask yourself, the quality of your thoughts. Like, if someone were to put the quality of your thoughts on video, right? What would the quality of the undertone of your thoughts be? Would it be, would it be helpful? Would it be depressing?
Right.
Would it be
right?
What does the quality of the mood, your thoughts reflect, right? As a way to kind of figure out, are these thoughts helpful? Are these thoughts aligned with the things that I value as important? What
Are y'all writing this down?
Yeah, come on.
Get your pen and paper. Okay, go back to the first one. What was the first one? What should they be writing down? We want to teach here.
Look, what are the quality of my thoughts? And what I mean by that is really, really be honest with yourself, whether it's taking out a piece of paper and like really not showing anybody, of course, but like asking yourself, like, are my thoughts helpful? Are my thoughts empowering? Are my thoughts, do my thoughts, I should say, kind of reflect the kind of person I wish to become, or the kind of person that I value?
Yeah.
Really being honest with yourself about that, right? And if not, whether it's, kind of identifying, patterns of your thoughts, and oftentimes what I refer to, or when I talk about like the patterns of your thoughts, I often have patients or give them homework, right? Of doing like a
Yay
thought
for
record.
homework.
Yes.
I keep telling y'all, like your
Yes.
therapist should be giving y'all homework. So I'm glad you
Absolutely.
do.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, you know, really taking note in stock of the kinds of thoughts that tend to surface, right? We can't change anything that we don't have, awareness of. And so whether it's, doing a check-in at the end of the day, how did I feel today? What kind of thoughts were popping up?
Right.
Or if knowing that certain situations trigger the hell out of you, having maybe like, note section of your phone opened up, or jotting real quick, like what thoughts are going through your mind.
Exactly.
You don't have to challenge them. Again, the point is being able to acknowledge those thoughts and have them out, right? Again, we can't change anything that we don't have in a full awareness of,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's good. And I think another one to add is, are your thoughts yours? Because a lot of times the things that we're thinking, and especially when it comes down to the thoughts that we have of ourselves, that it's not our voice. It could be your father's voice, it could be your mother's voice, it could be your ex's voice. So you want to make sure who's really speaking. Are these my thoughts, or is this something that was said to me and then they became my thoughts? You know what I'm saying? So that's important. That's really important to do. You were saying to write down. Jen, do you mind handing me the journal right there? I never do this, and I've been fussed at several times. Like, you have 2 books, you have merch, and you never talk about any of these things. So a few years ago, I did a book. I wrote a book called My Rebirth Self Healing Journal, and you can get this on rebirthyou.com. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because you talked about writing down your feelings, your thoughts, and stuff like that. And I actually put activities in here that people can use to track. Like, this one is called a feelings log. Well, you guys can't. I don't know if you can see it. It's a feelings log, and it has. I don't have my glasses on. Hold on, y'all. I got distorted reading right now. Give me a second. Okay. All right. So it says, please place a check mark in the box that most describes how you are feeling each day of the week. And it gives you a list of feelings from happy, sad, angry, excited, to irritated, proud, disgusted, regretful, guilty, ashamed, anxious, confident, all the way down. And then it gives you Monday through Sunday, right? And you just simply check off how you're feeling, so you can keep track. And because sometimes you don't realize that you're in depression, or that you're dealing with anxiety, if you're not tracking how many days through the week that you're having those feelings. Those are some of the things that we ask you during intakes, right? So if you're coming for therapy in the intake, we're going to ask you, what are your symptoms? How frequent do you have these symptoms? Right? So this is a good way of tracking it. And there's a lot of other different things in there, right? That's going to help you in regards to forgiving, releasing, and to letting go. But I never bring this out. But when you said that, I did make a journal for people to work through some of that cognitive distortion. And you can get it at Rebirth You. It comes in a ebook as well. It comes in an ebook, but it also comes in the paperback.
Come on, shameless plug.
You know, I mean, why not?
I mean, it is your podcast.
It's well, you know.
You know, I mean, you make a really good point outside of,
Mhm.
recording your thoughts. You also want to be mindful and record like your feelings, right? I
Mhm.
mean, and the purpose of that, again, is to increase awareness about what's going on in your mind, but also seeing if there's any specific patterns,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Am I finding myself feeling sad, often at the beginning of the morning
Yeah.
or at night? Or do
Yeah.
I find myself feeling anxious
Yeah.
at night? What kinds of things are going through my mind? I mean, again, this is all helpful information to kind of
Mhm.
see what's going on, right?
Mhm.
And the other thing that, you may utilize journals, right, to help with this, or if you have a therapist, you may lean on your therapist to kind of help you with this part, right? But really challenging your thoughts. Like,
Mhm.
oftentimes we take our thoughts as facts, as truth, right?
Yeah.
And we don't ever challenge them. I don't
Mhm.
say we don't ever, but very seldom do I hear patients that struggle with these thoughts,
Yeah.
challenge these thoughts. They
Yeah.
kind of relinquish, well, you know I'm not enough, so it must be
Mhm.
true.
Yep.
you know um he left me, because, something I wasn't doing, right?
Mhm.
It must be
Mhm.
true, right?
Mhm.
We really have to be mindful of, accepting our truths as facts.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
so easy to do that when you're not feeling the greatest about yourself,
Yeah.
or when you had a
Absolutely.
circumstance that, reinforce maybe a negative image of yourself or others, right? But
Mhm.
really taking a hard look, like, does this really reflect the truth?
Mhm.
Or does this reflect just how I'm feeling right now?
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah. I'll give you one that's just recent, that a lot of people is dealing with, right? So with the planes that were falling,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So now nobody, nobody wants to fly. I don't want to fly. But we seen the 3 or 4 planes that went down, crashed, or whatever the case may be.
Mm.
But we're not looking at all the thousands of planes that have landed safely to their destination.
Mm.
Right. And we don't talk about those, but we're only talking about the ones that we saw that went down,
Mm.
you know? Um, that's another thing that's a perfect example with cognitive distortion, because you're looking at that and now all the planes is going to go down. I can't
Mhm.
trust no planes. And I'm not flying. I'm not going because, canceling reservations because
Mm.
the planes are falling out the sky. No,
Mm.
3 or 4 planes went down, but there was thousands of planes that landed to the destination. We just
Mm.
didn't see those planes on the news, right?
Mhm.
So even, media,
Yeah.
media can give you, like at this point, we can keep watching TV. We all gonna be back in shackles. You know what I'm saying? It's just like
Yeah.
that's, if you don't watch it, those things come in your
Mm.
head, and that's what
Mhm.
you're going to be thinking. We're
Mhm.
going backwards. We all going to be, lynched and all of these things because
Mhm.
of what's happening right now in the government.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, you bring up some really important gems. One of those being, oftentimes with the distorted thoughts, we're looking at pieces, right? And
Mhm.
one of the things that could be a helpful question in challenging the thoughts, am I
Mhm.
looking at this bigger picture, or is this a piece of a
Right.
bigger picture, right?
Right.
That's one. um and also, you also have to be mindful of who and what you're listening to that reinforce those negative
Yes.
narratives. That's a big piece,
It's a
especially with
huge
everything
piece.
that's going on with news.
Yep.
You have to be
Yep.
exceptionally mindful.
Yeah. Absolutely. Even with music. Like
Yes.
if you've identified you got faulty thinking, 'cause that's what I call it. I call it faulty thinking.
Mm.
If you've identified that you have faulty thinking, or you're feeling low, you don't need to be listening to nothing that's gonna make you feel lower.
Mm. Not
You
no
know?
Summer
No,
Walker.
right. That's my girl though. But
Look.
but yeah, I mean, you need to throw on something inspirational, something that's
Mm.
gonna lift you up. And most time people don't. They
Yeah.
want to go. They want to sink further. I just want to. just want to get further down in the pain. Give me something that's just gonna make me cry, and but no, you have to be careful with that because it's confirming the space that you're in.
Yeah. And it's a great example that you bring up, because oftentimes we use music as an outlet, whether to soothe ourselves, whether to express ourselves, right? And we're just going through a breakup, right? Is it helpful to be listening to Summer Walker, her breakup songs? I mean, is it?
No, it's not. But you be singing like,
look,
girl, with your glass of wine.
It hits different, right? And this is not to say that, you can't feel your feelings, right? Because you can. It's helpful to an extent.
You know who mine was?
What?
When I was going through my divorce, I think I played the mess out of Keisha Cole.
Which song?
Girl, all of them. Until she made that other song.
Which one?
Shoulda Let You Go.
Oh, yes.
I was blasting that thing like, hey. But yeah, Keisha Cole, she was the one that I was listening to a lot when I was going through that. Let me turn this girl off and get some spirit up in me and get my life together.
Ooh. I mean, music really do be having you in your feelings.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they have you in your feelings.
Yes,
absolutely. But I love music. It's just. I know it's not one of the love languages, but music just speaks to me. It speaks to my soul so deeply. So yeah.
I mean, it does for me too. I mean, I wasn't listening to Keisha Cole, but I mean, there was a song by Ariana Grande that was like "Thank You Next."
Yes,
right?
yes.
I was bumping it to it. Just music can be a helpful thing as well. So. Girl, I have a whole catalog if you ask me. But
yeah, I like that. So I think it's on my playlist as well. Yes. Yeah.
So that makes me wonder, like, what would you say to, I know we've mentioned, being mindful of things that reinforce negative thoughts, negative narratives, right? So if we're not listening to maybe songs that reinforce what we're feeling, what would you recommend to people to listen to or to do when these thoughts surface?
Yeah, so I like to tell people that you need to have a coping skill toolbox. Like you're gonna have these moments, girl, because you had it last week and the week before, so you're gonna have it this week too. You're gonna have these moments where you're feeling a little down or whatever the case may be. We kind of know it comes like clockwork. So instead of waiting for that moment to happen to now implementing the coping skill, you can kind of tell when you're kind of spiraling. You know what I'm saying? So start to do things for yourself. Do a routine for yourself, things that make you feel good. Right? So like for me, everybody knows I love anything involving water, whether it's the beach or sitting by the water or just having water fountains or falls in my house or somewhere in my yard, right? I love candles. I love anything that's spa related. I love massages. So I love massages. I love some massages. So I would say do those things for yourself. When you're feeling low like that, instead of getting your bottle of wine and turning on something like Summer Walker that's going to put you in a bigger hole, go treat yourself. Take yourself out on a date. Go to take yourself to dinner. You don't have to wait for anybody to take you to dinner. It's important to have a good support system. I have women around me that are for different things. If I want a certain experience with a certain person, I know who to call, for that. And they're all amazing women in my life, but they're all are great at what they do. And I know who to contact for certain things. You know what I'm saying? So I just say, just have that little toolbox that you can just tap into definitely don't put that type of music on. Put on something that's inspirational, something that's uplifting. You know, physical activity.
Yes.
I like to work out. Right, it's been hard since my surgery, but that is something that really, really helped, and it boosts those chemicals. So if you don't want to be on medication, working out is a good way to balance those chemicals out, rather it's depression or anxiety. When you're working out, it just levels everything out. So something like that. And it doesn't have to be a big workout. It could be yoga, right? It could be just getting on the floor and stretching,
or even walking,
you know, or just walking, you know. So one of the things I've gotten into, I did me and Jen, we did a art project, and it was so therapeutic. We just took a piece of canvas and a head, and we chopped the head off. We chopped the head off the neck. You know those wig styrofoams, but that people put their wigs on.
Yeah,
it was those, and we put it on the canvas so the head looks like it's coming out of the. It's beautiful. I should have put it up on the show tonight so people could see, but it was very, very therapeutic. So take up a new hobby.
Yes.
Do something that you haven't done before, that you've been waiting to do or you've been wanting to do. You don't have to do it perfectly, because I'm not an artist, but I looked like Picasso when I was done. So those are the things that I would recommend.
Wow.
What about you?
For me, I think the biggest thing for me, at least for me personally, never underestimate the power of a good walk. Just getting outside, being in nature, getting outside of the environment that may be triggering you, or an environment that you may be, spending most of your time in, just new scenery, right? And the biggest thing that I hear you say, which reminds me of, modality that we often use in mental health, right, is DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And it talks about doing the opposite or acting the opposite of how you feel. If you want to withdraw from people, maybe that might be the time to connect with maybe someone who fills your cup up. If you want to retreat, eat chips, and, be in the dark, maybe that might be the time to go for a walk. Or maybe that might be the time to, put on some music and just jam out like nobody's watching, right? Like those be the best moments.
Yeah. Yes. You know what? Maybe about 3 or 4 weekends ago. I was just bored. I was just like, oh, so I don't want to do something, but I didn't really want to go out.
Okay.
Man, I turned on that karaoke machine.
Come on.
Poured me a glass of wine, and we was sitting on that couch and doing karaoke and had a good old time. Me and Shannon, we had a ball. Just like, it was only 2 of us. Had a ball, just singing and laughing and thinking about some of the old songs. We did the Mary J. Blige and the Method Man songs. You know what I'm talking about? Or are you too young to know what I'm talking about? Don't act like that. Don't act like that now. Shoot. But it was just, it was a good time, right? It didn't cost us anything. Sometimes just doing stuff like that is fun. So I decided that when summer came, at least one Friday out of the month, I'm gonna have karaoke in the Oasis. So we're gonna have a good time. So get your vocals ready. Get your vocals ready. We're gonna have a ball.
Now, look, that's the type of club that I be into, right? Where you literally in the comfort of your own home, jamming to music like nobody's watching, singing your heart's content. You know what I mean? It's activities like that, walking, yoga, that really help you to get from out of your head and out into, life, and those are great examples of doing it. It doesn't necessarily have to be this big thing like, working out 3 hours of the day, or it doesn't have to be a production. It could be doing with what you have where you are, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, and that's with that could be helpful in helping to kind of challenge these thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. This was good.
It was.
Yes, this is good. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to put it in the chat, and I will do my best to make sure I am able to answer that. Now, Jen, are you taking any new clients?
So I am. I
Okay.
am taking new clients. I primarily work with those that struggle with anxiety and depression.
Mhm.
And so I can provide my information.
Yes,
Um,
please do.
yeah.
Mhm.
If you are interested in connecting with me for services, you are more than welcome to reach out. I'm trying to think of the best contact to reach out.
Child, don't give your personal number
Oh,
now.
hell no. No, no, no. You could definitely reach out to my email address, which is J, F is in Frank, O is in Ocean, N is in Nancy, T is in Tom, A is in Apple, L is in Lion, at gohealthuc.com.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
There you have it. There you have it. So it's important that we have these conversations, that we talk about these things, because a lot of people probably don't even realize that they have distorted thinking. They've normalized it so much.
Yeah.
And you know, I want to say this too. Whatever that you may be going through or may be thinking that is causing some type of strife in your life, um ask yourself this: is it going to matter
Mm.
5 hours from now? And it may, right? Is it going to matter 5 days from now? Usually some of the things, no,
Right.
but then some may. Is it going to matter 5 weeks from now?
Mm.
You see where I'm going? Is it
Mm-hmm.
going to matter 5 months from now? Is it going to matter 5 years from now? And I usually try to check myself, because yes, we're therapists, but we're human. We go through our
Absolutely.
own, we have distorted thinking just like y'all do,
Mm-hmm.
right? So sometimes you have to like really use these type of little techniques to really check yourself. And most of the time you don't go past the 5 days, right?
Mm.
What I'm saying to you is, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through, this is not your forever.
Mm.
It's not your forever. And then those that it is, because death is.
Yeah.
So when you've lost someone, you never forget about that person, but what you do is you learn to live alongside of it.
Mm.
You learn to live alongside of that, and you
Yeah.
can do that. And you can do that, learn how to do that by getting help and by going to therapy. Those are some of the things that a therapist can help you do,
Mm-hmm.
right? But most of the things usually don't go past the 5 days. And those that do, those are more permanent things, like
Mm-hmm.
losing someone.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to just check: 5 hours, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years.
Mm.
I guarantee you most things you're not even going to get to the 5 years.
Mm. That's a good
So my
point.
point is, the things that we're worrying about and we're that's causing us these issues are usually things that are temporary. They're
Mm.
not going to be your forever.
Yeah. That was a good one. What
You
do I
like
say
that?
after that?
You like that? Thank you and good night. No. I'm
That's all,
joking.
folks. No, that's a good point. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a little cute technique to use.
it is. I think, certain situations that may cause us strife, like you said, may not be worth the emotional energy that we
Mhm.
invest into it, right?
Mhm.
And the other piece about challenging thoughts that I often want to share with people, right? It's not like a one and done thing, like,
Mhm.
you know, I challenge this thought and I'm good. No,
Mhm.
right? We're humans, right? And it's natural for those thoughts to surface again, right? It's a
Yeah.
muscle you have to practice, right? I mean,
Mhm.
again, you heard from Shay, we're humans, we're
Yeah.
therapists, right? And this is something that we experience distorted, twisted thinking, as well as you guys. And
Yeah.
so it's it's helpful to understand that again, this is a muscle you have to practice in talking back to those thoughts and challenging those thoughts.
Mhm.
And again, remembering if there's anything that you do remember or take away from this conversation, that your thoughts don't necessarily reflect the truth.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then those that are believers out there,
Mm.
cuz I'm going to speak to y'all too directly. Because you can't be saying you got faith and trust in God and still be worrying about it too. So you either gonna do one or two things. You either gonna trust God and believe him, or you gonna worry about it. And most of the things that we're worried about are out of our control anyway. Right? So it's just really, really wasted energy. So you got to decide, either you're going to pray about this thing, you're going to give it to God, or you're going to continue to worry about it. But you just can't do both. You can't do both. So, yeah.
Wow, this was such a good convo.
Yes, it was. You got to come more often.
Most definitely.
Me and Jen used to be together almost every day.
Yeah.
Like we was to, like, you know, but we still sisters,
Yes,
you know, we still sisters, and we catch up when we can. And it's always, when we do catch up, we just, it's like we was never apart, you know? So, but I definitely want to work on making my time a little bit more available and less busy. Cause that's my goal.
Okay.
Cause I miss you.
Yes,
I miss
likewise.
you. Yeah, I do. I miss you. But I appreciate you coming on and spending time with us and sharing that wealth of information again. If you are looking for a therapist, because I know many of you are, Jen is excellent and she's really, really good at what she does. Can you give your email one more time?
Yes, I can. It's J Fontal, which is F is in Frank, O is in Ocean, N is in Nancy, T is in Tom, A is in Apple, L is in Lion, at gohealthuc.com. I know that's long, but
Thank you, Jen. We appreciate you. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. You want to stay connected so you can continue to get all the information that we're bringing to you. So until next Monday, you guys have a wonderful, wonderful week and be safe. God bless.
bye.